You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Jordan Obinger, the creative director and founder over at Edition Studios. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Can we start out just with a little overview? What is Edition Studios?
So Edition Studios specializes in brand creation and digital experiences. And we really work with a wide range of industries, from luxury consumer goods to real estate to hospitality, really any brands that focus on high-end visual content. So anything from branding, web, social, content, and marketing.
So for today's episode, we're really going to be diving into brand identity today, specifically talking about two core elements. One, how to build a brand identity from scratch for listeners who maybe don't have a brand identity today. And then two, for those that maybe have a brand identity or components of it, how you can think about leveling up that brand identity. So maybe stepping back, let's talk through some of the definitions and core concepts just at a high level. First of all, brand identity. Jordan, what do you classify as falling into that broad umbrella term of brand identity?
Yeah, good question. A brand identity can really be any element that visualizes who the brand is to its consumer and really how they see themselves. It can be anything from logo, icons, word brand photography, voice, message, tone, anything that really portrays who the company is to the end consumer.
Now, maybe for those who haven't previously built out a brand identity, maybe they're a little bit skeptical about some of the time and resources that would go into that. What would you say is the big argument for investing in building out a brand identity?
I've heard that a lot. We've got a lot of clients that have come to us over the years, and they say, hey, I need help with marketing. My brand's fine. My brand identity is great. Most of our business comes from word of mouth. And usually when we start looking at the brand elements, a lot of times our clients will say, hey, yeah, we literally made this logo on the back of a napkin at 2 a.m. with all my business partners, and it's worked so far. And the other half of our clients that come to us oftentimes say, yeah, we made a logo, we made an identity at the beginning of the company, but it didn't have the brand ethos, the intention that really connects to an end consumer. And so for a lot of these brands, their logo's gotten them so far, or as far as they can go. But what would happen if they started thinking about any barriers or any visual connectivity that could help their end consumer really relate to their brand a lot more? And so there's a lot of different components that go into a brand identity. It isn't just a fun visual that consumers can look at, but really should tell the story of who they are and what impact they can make on their end consumer.
So let's say for the early stage brand new businesses, maybe we'll look at a business that's starting out, let's say more or less from square one with building a brand identity. At a very high level, what are some of the core components that would go into building out that identity? And what I'd love to do is speak to it at a very high level, dive a little bit deeper into those concepts. And maybe what we can do is look at a couple different businesses, one really early stage, one a little bit more established. But let's start out. What are those high level steps to building the brand identity?
Yeah, that's a good question. When a company's in the first few stages of identifying a path or a direction to where their brand will go, a lot of times what we will do, even in the proposal phases when we're identifying what process would work best for them, is going back to some of the initial basics to marketing 101, which is often considered the 4 Ps: price, product, promotion, and place. Those factors all have a huge play in a brand's identity. And really it comes down to how can you as a brand differentiate from all of your competition? And for a lot of the clients that we work with, price doesn't really matter. A lot of our clients are in more a high-end luxury experiential brand. And oftentimes the product maybe can't be differentiated from their competition as well. And so when thinking about a brand identity, If a brand really needs to differentiate itself from competition because price doesn't play a factor, location doesn't play a factor, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. So think of a safari in Tanzania. There's only a few amount of businesses in Tanzania that do safaris. It's a very specific audience and they can really charge whatever they want. Or think about a Taylor Swift concert. She's obviously very famous right now and has concerts all over the world, and her ticket prices are selling exponentially. This all comes down to brand experience and how owner or an identity can really sell itself to its consumers. So oftentimes brands offer exclusivity, status, craftsmanship. They might say they build the most high quality homes or the best made tequila on the planet. And so really where we start is looking at the product and looking at it from the lens of the consumer's viewpoint. How do they connect with it? What are their first initial thoughts and emotions and feelings when they view a brand? And most consumers are looking at products on Instagram, on social media, they're Googling online. You can't oftentimes smell the brand, you can't taste the brand. It's really visual. Oftentimes you can include sound and emotion and obviously web copy to help bring it to life, but it's really one static icon or visual. And so the first component, long-winded there, is the brand name. How does the brand name connect to an end user? Is it unique and original, or is it more generic? And so thinking about the brand name, and obviously, Pat, you can go a lot deeper into search engine optimization and how the actual name itself can help brands rank higher in Google search. But honing in on a brand name, a lot of our clients will come to us either with a brand name and say, hey, we don't love it. Let's explore some new brand names. We're ready to move on to the second phase of our business growth. And then a lot of times companies will come to us and say, we have an LLC, we have a brand name that works, but we haven't launched yet. We want you to come up with 10 different brand names that can really help push us into the marketplace. But I think the second component to a brand identity that is extremely important is the first visual moment you see from a logo perspective. Thinking about typeface, color, texture. Some brands have 3D logos, some brands have 2D logos. Super, super simple, and honing in on details that actually matter. You've seen brands over the years, let's just say Pepsi. Their brand has evolved and changed dramatically over the past 15, 20 years. Similarly with Starbucks, they started very complex with detailed elements making up their logos. And over the years, they start going more simple, and scaling back to really make sure that every element is very intentional and less fluff. So consumers these days want brands to feel authentic. They want to really feel connected to them. And consumers are great at kind of coming through the BS brands, the brands that, don't have an authentic identity, and moving straight past them. A lot of follow-up questions that come to mind from that. One of the first things that sticks out to me, and I see this as someone who is I'll admit I am very clueless when it comes to brand identity. I'm lucky that over the years I've been able to work with some really intelligent branding experts. I'm the one who makes the stereotypical comment of the logo should just be a little bit larger than it currently is, which is a branding expert's favorite thing to hear. How should I actually think about, let's say, something like font when it comes to brand? How is it that you even go about starting to determine what is a good brand font to work with? That's a really good question. When thinking about fonts and typefaces, there's obviously millions of different directions you can go. You can go standard stock types that you can purchase and download off the internet. And then there's the second path, which is creating custom typeface, custom logo. We oftentimes use a mix of both. And where we usually tend to start is really thinking about the brand ethos, the persona. We'll often put together a lot of mood boards that have a lot of visuals to really bring us in the mindset of the direction that the logo is heading. And so thinking of different styles of typefaces, there's obviously serif typefaces and sans serif typefaces. Sans serif is like an Arial or Helvetica that doesn't have serifs on the edge of the words. And then a serif typeface is something more like Times New Roman, which feels a little bit more traditional. And then there's a lot of other typefaces outside of that, Gothic, Roman. And so thinking of a visual that resembles who the brand is. If we were to think about a brand's typeface and how it connects to a consumer brand, let's just take a luxury pillow company. There's a lot of different elements that come to your mind. Obviously, you want it to feel tranquil, calm, elegant, perhaps sophisticated. If we're throwing in the luxury element, we'll want to use some deeper, more complex typefaces that resemble more high-end brands. But with a luxury pillow company, you'll want to look for a softness and a calmness to the typeface. So I would immediately gravitate towards a sans serif typeface. The other thing I would start thinking about is what connections from a luxury pillowcase will connect to the end consumer. I'm thinking in my mind, something calm, soothing, a little bit sleepy, nothing sharp or jagged or too loud. A loud brand would be like MTV. It stands out. It's very kind of loud and obnoxious. But so thinking of something perhaps like the Soothe app or the Calm app, where the pillow itself is bringing through a lot of calm elements. And so looking for typefaces that have a sense of calmness, slowness. I would probably stick to neutral colors, maybe even black and white, or tap into kind of like the midnight blue and darker tones.
I would imagine we'll get some of the same overarching insights, but can you speak to some of that same analysis you just went through? Let's say in particular when it comes to determining brand colors. So I would imagine, again, we want to go with that calming, that soothing color palette. How would I even start to come up with colors that like evoke those particular emotions? Are there specific like resources I can look to? What's your take there?
So when it comes down to brand colors, there's a lot of color theories you could get into. And I actually like to stay away from overly thinking about the traditional color theories, red being strong and bold, blue meaning cold. And so where I would actually go first is doing a visual mood board of photos, videos, and other design elements and start to pick apart what different materials could really play within the color palette. One of the brands working with right now is a luxury home builder. And in the early phases of their brand strategy and brand discovery sessions, one of the co-owners, he constantly went back to cars. He likes cigars and leather. And so we actually started pulling color palettes of Porsche colors, Mercedes colors. We then ordered color samples from Restoration Hardware of other fabrics and materials that could connect to the interior lifestyle components, home building. And we started to put this color palette together that really was more than just colors. It was how do we evoke the smell of leather or an evening cigar or a glass of whiskey, and pairing that with common visuals that someone might think of when they think luxury interior. That's kind of the direction when thinking about color. We oftentimes like to stay away from overly listening to our clients' favorite colors or least favorite colors. Those can often be blockers to the creative process. And through the identity phase, what we like to really focus on is identifying a path that can eliminate our clients' personal preferences. Design and branding is very subjective. People have a lot of preconceived notions to certain design styles and visuals. And even for ourselves, we like to fully remove any personal connections to colors, typefaces, brand visuals, and try to put on the mindset of the end consumer and really see what they want to see in a brand identity. And not to say a logo shouldn't be loved by the owner or the team putting the brand together, but really thinking of the consumer as the primary audience.
Staying with that consumer for a minute, in your opinion, what level of maybe involvement or feedback should the consumer actually have in terms of building this brand identity? Whether it's like a brand new brand and you're just saying, hey, this is what I think my end consumer is going to like, or let's actually even start out with this, maybe this client you're working with now. Yep. Sounds like they have existing customers. How involved is past customer feedback in this brand identity rebuild?
That's a great question. The involvement that we have with our clients is very in-depth. We're not the agency. I'm thinking of online brands like Fiverr or different brands that create logos out of thin air. We're the complete opposite. What we do when we onboard a new client is have them fill out a client discovery packet. Essentially, it gets into their mind of where they potentially see the brand going. So even before we start showing them mood boards, visuals, or talking about personas or demographics, we're trying to get in their mindset of where they see the brand go. And at that point is typically the phase where we will do a lot of in-depth research. We'll pull competitive analysis. We'll pull a lot of targeting demographics where Nielsen studies will show if the end consumer is a 55-year-old making $250,000 a year, well-traveled, speaks 2 languages, maybe married with 2 kids, we'll pull all the information. We'll get information on what zip codes they live in, what kind of cars they drive, what they're watching on TV. Do they shop at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's? And really try to understand what a day in their life looks like. And through this process of learning who their end consumer is, we will then present it back to our clients. And it's really this is a kind of the breakthrough point when we're talking to our client about who their audience is and who their product is and how those two connect. A light bulb kind of goes off in their mind. And 9 times out of 10, our clients really feel the deep connection to who their audience is. And at that point, we can start to paint the picture of what the logo will look like. Let's say 2 or 3 weeks down the road, we'll start showing them visual mood boards. We'll show them other aspirational brands that they see themselves competing up against. And so laying the groundwork and having a collaborative work session with our clients is extremely important. If we don't have that process, usually when we're presenting brands to clients, we don't do this very often, but if we were to not do the strategy and discovery phase, sometimes we get kind of the deer in the headlights look where they see it, they don't fully understand it. And so really talking through the intent behind design theory and aligning with target audiences is extremely important.
Going a little bit deeper into like the end consumer, how is it that you're able to collect that data about these end consumers? Is it paying for premium research reports? Is it typically asking the client like, hey, can we send a series of emails out to your entire email list? Could you talk about that process a bit?
Good question. So in our discovery process, where we are looking at data and metrics from a strategic approach, we go about it in a few different ways. The first way is we will oftentimes do stakeholder interviews with the client. If there's a board or if there's a number of C-suite or multiple owners, we will ask them a set of questions to get their insights. And the second piece to this is we'll oftentimes schedule meetings with some of their regular customers or past clients to really see what their experience was like working with the brand. And then the third phase to that is pulling Nielsen data. So we have access to a number of different data set points where it's basically AI meets Nielsen. We can start to build out personas and dig deep into specific business categories, products. And the more we dig in deeper, the more information it starts to spit back at us in terms of everyday consumer behaviors and traits. And then the fourth phase to this is what we'll actually do is start to go on social media. We'll Google, we'll find people that fit this persona. A lot of times it can be followers or people that I follow on Instagram. If I see a connection to one of their target audiences or demographics, what we'll start to do is pull information based on real-time data of individuals that we follow on social media, and we'll start looking at a day in their life and piecing it all together. So there's a lot of data and metrics that we have access to, and through this process, we like to try to extract as much information and relay it back to our clients in a way that makes sense, that it's clear and concise and data-driven, and pack the back end of the presentation with a lot of appendix and data so that, if they're bored on a weeknight and want to skim through 50 or 60 pages of data and analytics, they're welcome to, but we like to pull out the components that we can really hold on to and start to push into the brand ethos.
I know I've firsthand had the experience of looking at a brand that just has like the I would describe it as kind of like the cheap feel behind it. Like you kind of see it and you're like, yeah, these guys should really be putting more money into their brand. Like they're a little too big to just have like this Fiverr logo. That being said, I could never exactly put my finger on what is it exactly that kind of gives that like cheap feel, let's say, to a brand. Maybe for listeners that either haven't touched their brand in 10 years, let's say, or are just starting to see maybe like signs of cracks and they're thinking like, we should be investing more in brand, but we don't really know how to start. What advice would you give for maybe auditing that existing brand, identifying, do you need a full scale overhaul or you just need to upgrade 10% of it?
That's a really good question. And we get that a lot of times as well. Companies will come to us and say, hey, we want you to help with marketing and a bunch of other areas. And we say, hold up, slow down for a second. Before we start spending money on pay-per-click ads and billboard and direct mail, let's take a step back and assess your brand identity and ensure that it connects with your end audience. So when a brand comes to us and has had an identity that perhaps has been around for 5, 10, 15 years or even longer, there's a brand cycle that often happens every 5 to 10 years. And this is a very common theme. There's nothing against any one specific brand, but design trends change, identities change and evolve. As a brand grows and continues to grow, a lot of core elements that make up the brand may have changed. A rebrand or a brand refresh should never be considered a bad thing or something that a company is doing wrong, but really it should be, how can I ensure that my brand is connecting to its consumers the best it possibly could? And so the first step is really listing out the brand key attributes and offerings and ensuring that all of the services or products that you're selling, does the brand identity still align with our core services or products? The second step would be comparing your identity up against your main competitors. Does your brand feel dated? Do some of your competitors feel more forward thinking and innovative? That might be a good chance to take a step back and reconsider your brand's identity. And then the third would be, where does your brand overlap with your competitors and where should you differentiate? The identity is the first visual element that your consumers will see. And so ensuring that you feel extremely confident that your brand identity is different from your consumers is extremely important. So I would say those are the first few steps. There's really not a rule book per se of, is my brand identity outdated or should it go through a refresh? A good time to assess your current brand identity is when you're either going through a growth period where you're hiring, your business is expanding into new products and services, or you're feeling like you're a little bit stuck and you're not growing as rapidly or as quickly as you would like. And so that's a great time to take a step back and look at your brand's perception. That can be anything from your website, social media, web copy, and definitely your brand identity.
If we can, I'd love to take a few minutes and really help let's say the early stage businesses, the do-it-yourselfers. We'll make some assumptions about them, but let's assume they're operating on a pretty tight budget. They know that they need to formalize their brand, but they're thinking, hey, we really want to figure out how to do this in-house. First, are there specific maybe tools that they should look towards that would be really helpful for them to start the process with?
That's a great question. I think some of the best tools and resources out there from a brand development standpoint, most of them are free. Most of them, you don't need to subscribe to premium services. The first one that I would say is extremely beneficial as a brand that everyone has used is Pinterest. We start by looking up a lot of inspiration on Pinterest, creating different boards and brand visuals. The second one that our team uses every single day through creative processes is a new, I don't know how new it is, but it's a brand called Milanote. And what Milanote allows you to do is basically create mood boards, visuals, timelines in a brainstorm collaborative way. And so oftentimes when we talk to startups or brands that don't know what the first step to take is, or they don't know what the second and third step to take is, when you're at a stopping point where you feel stuck, you feel like there's barriers and you can't creatively continue to evolve your brand, oftentimes what we'll do is take a step back and either move to pen and paper or a whiteboard. A lot of times the human brain gets distracted or feels stuck if you're staring in front of a computer. So take a minute, take a step back, flip through some traditional magazines, create a mood board or a wireframe on a whiteboard, and you wouldn't believe how much more creativity your brain will really feel around that. And so the next platform that we use day in, day out is Figma. It's another design platform that is great for wireframing, web design, brand identity, and you can collaborate with a bunch of people for your team. And then the other one that oftentimes gets negative rapport in the design industry is Canva. I'm a huge believer that you do not need the fancy Adobe package day one. If there's tools and resources out there that can simplify and scale back some of the tools to make it easier to be creative and move forward, we are all for it. We have clients that use Canva. I would say our designers that are building brand identities maybe wouldn't use Canva, but there's a lot of tools and resources that can help you at least start getting creative. So if you're just starting out and you don't want to hire an agency or a contractor to create the brand identity, the spot that I would actually start is Google and look up on Pinterest, brand guidelines, brand identity, and download some brand guidelines that were created for other brands and start to look at what components build a brand identity. And then the second spot I would start is looking at free resources that can be a great place to start to outline components to a brand identity. Canva is a great resource that really helps creative minds that don't have a traditional design background build out identities using some of their templates or themes that start to bring you through the creative process, from color palettes, typefaces, and what are the key elements that go into a brand identity. Thinking social icons, horizontal typeface lockups, different ways to export logos. All of that can really be kind of simplified within Canva. And I would say start super, super simple. And if you get a spurt of creativity and want to put together different mood boards and what your brand means, I would say follow that as well.
One of the things I'm really curious to hear your take on, when you're either talking to other branding experts or you're talking to businesses that are doing branding in-house, in your opinion, like really expensive or really costly mistakes you see those businesses or those individuals making, and what would you recommend doing instead?
That's a great question. I would say when you're in the early phases of creating a brand identity, a lot of times there will be an evolution to the logo. I would say start simple, don't make it overly complex, and you can slowly build and evolve the brand over time. There's a lot of free resources out there that don't cost a lot of money. And I would say keep the design in-house as much as possible until you're able to collaborate with an agency or an outside partner. We're not bashing Fiverr or those different platforms, but really being intentional about creating a design that means something to your end consumer is really important. In the early stages of creating a brand, if you're feeling stuck with the brand identity, a lot of times what we will advise to people in that situation is start wireframing the website. Start thinking about the inspiration for your future product. Start looking at product packaging or mapping out a website. So even if clients come to us and say, hey, we don't have a ton of money to start a website right now, go to Squarespace. There's a lot of amazing templates and themes that start at about $39 a month. That's a great place to at least start to put the brand visual and web experience together. There's nothing wrong with starting with a template or a theme to really start the creative process. A brand is never final. It's never complete. There's always new ways to advance and grow the brand. So I would say keep your head high and utilize the tools that you have and just get going.
And I'll definitely second that. We'll talk to brands really often that will say, hey, we can't afford to spend maybe 20K on the low end, 50K is more so a norm on a full scale website from an agency. And oftentimes I'll say to them like, hey, you don't need a full scale WordPress or Shopify website if you're doing $10,000 a year in revenue. Start out with something on Squarespace. It's a really great starting point. It's going to take you time, but you can design a really great looking site. And that'll be what you need for phase 1, phase 2. Just expect that you're going to need to invest further into that over time.
100%. Fake it till you make it.
Definitely. Well, what about this? Maybe for the co-founders out there that have one really creative-minded individual and then maybe one more analytical co-founder, what guidance can you offer for the creative founder to help them to get more buy-in for branding resources amongst their analytical counterpart?
We also do this all the time. And it's great to have both sides as co-founders going through the experience, and brainstorming and collaborating is extremely critical, especially when you have a co-owner or a business partner that you're launching something with. If you can't be in person brainstorming and looking at visuals, there's a ton of great apps out there that can help this. Google Meets, Milanote, Figma, Canva. Get creative and start having conversations about what design means, what photography means. And from the analytical standpoint, there's a lot of different point of views that can be brought into effect, whether it's about financial models, price, the marketing strategy, digital reach. There's a lot there. And so I think thinking of it from both sides of the minds, from the creative and then maybe the more analytical side, is really key. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that we see brands making when they're launching a brand identity or when they're launching a website is they're either completely copying competition, and consumers can tell if the brand is not authentic. So I would say the first component is active listening and understanding who your target audience is. And if you are doing that, leading with honesty, integrity, and authenticity will really put you forward. You can really only fake it for so long, and consumers these days see through the BS. And I would say keep it super, super simple and be very detail oriented in a lot of the little components that build the strong brand. Yeah, and I'd say, Edition Studios is a small company. We've got 7 full-time employees and about 15 contractors. And what gets us extremely excited is when we meet business owners or companies that are on the trajectory to grow and feel stuck. They don't know what the first step to take is, or maybe they're taking 100 steps at once and not doing anything meaningful or in the correct way. We love to step in, see where they're coming from, see the opportunities of where they could grow, and really act as an extension to their team. Again, we're a small team. We've got about 30 brands that we work with on a monthly basis, but we're growing very quickly. There's a few rules that Edition lives by from an employee perspective and even partnering with clients. And the first one is reduce friction wherever possible. There's a lot of brands or agencies out there that will abide by their project scope, but we really love to identify any opportunities and help in any ways that are possible. The second one is streamline and increase efficiencies. The third is no bullshit. Fourth, be nice. We're all human. We feel like when we're partnering with other companies that we're really an extension to their team. We want to feel a strong connection with them and understand their thought processes. And the fifth one is don't just check the boxes. So all that to say, our team loves what we do. We are excited to meet with future brands, whether you're just getting started or if you're in the stage of growing and advancing your business even further.
Jordan, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? For listeners that want to work with Edition or just want to get other resources from you and the team, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is editionstudios.com, EDITION studios.com, or can email us at hello@editionstudios.com and on Instagram at edition.studios.
Brilliant. And listeners, we'll share those links in the show notes as well. So once again, this is Jordan Obinger, the creative director and founder over at Edition Studios. Jordan, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.